Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jedley. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Ryeigh, located in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts, in the shadow of the Great Blue Hills. We are so very honored and delighted that you join us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can help us in that mission by telling all of your family and friends about the show. Tell your kids, teachers, principals, librarians. Let them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network. And they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, Amazon Music, Audible, Podcast Addict, CastBox, wherever you find your favorite shows. Two wonderful guests will be joining us today. Carter Higgins will be here celebrating Round and Round the Year We Go. Later in the show, we'll be joined by Ryleigh A Starr, coming to us from Australia, celebrating her Australian Animal Children's Book Series. Are you looking for a creative way to bond with your kids? Let me tell you all about Drawing with Your Kids, the ultimate destination for artistic adventures. Join us as we dive into the wonderful world of children's books with renowned illustrators guiding you step by step. From beloved characters to whimsical scenes, unleash your imagination and create cherished memories together. Whether you're a seasoned artist or just picking up a pencil, there's something for everyone at Drawing with Your Kids. Please visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com, and click on the Drawing with Your Kids link at the top of the page and let the creativity flow. Drawing with Your Kids, where every stroke brings stories to life. Join us right now from the beautiful state of Virginia. Our guest is here today to celebrate her beautiful picture book. It's called Round and Round the Year We Go. Please welcome to the show, Carter Higgins. Hey, Carter, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
You are most welcome. Round and Round the Year We Go. Tell us all about this book.
Sure. Round and Round the Year We Go is about the months of the year on one hand, but it's also a real celebration of how time passes and the things we can explore and the ways we play from season to season.
You know, when I first read the title of your book, I was instantly reminded of being at the first parent-teachers meeting at my daughter's high school. And she went to a very, really fun and funky and different international high school in Boston. It was right in downtown Boston. There were only 200 students, and half of them were from different countries. And so for the parent-teacher meeting, there wasn't a lot of international student representatives. There was just a few of us there. And the mom running the meeting, she was a parent of one of the upperclassmen. She was kind of not used to running public meetings, and she kind of said, it's November already. How did the time fly so fast? How did we get here?
Right.
And one of the parents with a totally straight face just said, well, the earth revolves around the sun. And when it comes, and I'm looking at him, waiting for him to crack a smile, but he was totally serious. And
That's great. I love that.
What inspired you to write this book for young ones?
I love that question. So I love to write things that end up becoming very much a puzzle. I don't think that was where the origin of this book came from, but very quickly I realized, okay, I'm writing bite-sized, small moment poems about each month of the year. So at the time, I was very busy, like many of us are, and it was a writing project that fit into my schedule. So rather than spending 8 hours at my desk, writing a huge chunk at a time, I was able to think about what's interesting about July and, spend 20 minutes thinking about it and, sort of piecing the book together that way. And I think that, one thing I love about books for children in particular is that there are some evergreen topics out there. I've made books about shapes and colors and now seasons and months. And these are not uncharted territory in picture books, but thinking about a way to do something fresh and different is a challenge that I really enjoy. So yeah, that's where it came from. I also just visually, I was a school librarian for 10 years, and the idea of a story time rug or a more classroom type circle time, I just think of a lot when I'm reading and when I'm working on books. And I wanted this book to feel the way classroom decorations look, which is a sort of abstract thought, but it was certainly something I kept in mind. How could I make this book feel like you're right in the middle of story time?
That's interesting. You are the first author out of the 2,000 episodes that we've published that talked about. I imagined this book being part of story time, and so many books are part of story time, and I think that's something that everybody aspires to. But obviously, you had that unique experience of being a librarian and running probably 1,000 story times or 10,000 story times.
Right.
In your life.
Right. Yeah, that's right. It's an easy thing to forget when we are sitting alone at our desk or wherever we're working, that the ultimate use for a book is to be read. And sometimes that happens, between smaller groups of people, maybe a grown up and a child or a kid just reading a pile of picture books on their own. But the storytime experience is such a communal, just fun time together. It helps me to think about the book being used in that setting. That helps drive a lot of language choices and rhythm. And what does this sound like when someone's reading pages on a book, versus, me going over it in my head all alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm very curious. I have made a living doing educational magic shows at schools and libraries across the country. And one of the things I love about it is that I get that immediate response. If I do a trick or tell a joke or trip, I get an immediate, it's like instantaneously. In fact, it's one of the reasons I don't have a lot of fun doing performances on Zoom, because there's oftentimes a delay. Right. And the first time it happened, I almost had a heart attack because I did this trick that always gets this big wow. And I did it, and there was nothing. There was 400 faces looking at me, and then all of a sudden, after maybe 5 seconds, but it felt like 10 hours. They all like, whoa. And I said, I can't handle this. I need the response. Right. How is it for you? You're not going to get a response on your work for years.
Yeah. That disconnect is sort of interesting. I have an author friend named Lindsay Eager who writes mostly middle grade and young adult, and she's described that feeling as like time travel. So the book is releasing very soon. Hopefully it has a nice entry into the world, but I've been finished with it for a while, both in production and in my very early drafts. And so this is sort of the time where you're remembering what was it like to write this book? Where did the idea come from? How hard was it to make these pictures? And so it's sort of a suspension to hope that, the readers will enjoy it. When I was a librarian and I was working on books, and kids would say like, when's your next book coming out? And they would be, first grade or something. I would sort of calculate the production pipeline years and tell them, oh, when you're in 4th grade or 5th grade. And it's like kind of mind boggling to think that kids that will read this book this year might have been, barely a baby when the idea first began. It's sort of a funny thing about making books.
Yeah. It's kind of like you're writing for a child in the future.
Right. and a child in the past when I think about how would I have liked it. And so like shortening the distance between the child version of me who is interested in this topic or this way of writing and the child in the future who might not even, exist on our planet yet, who might read it in the future. It's a very cool thread.
Yeah, yeah. How do you think children's, because you've had the perspective of what you enjoyed, and then you had that perspective of, as a librarian, of what your kids were enjoying at that moment. And now have another audience of kids. Do you think kids' tastes have changed a great deal over the years?
Oh, what an interesting thing to think about. I think the work that authors and illustrators are making for kids is so exciting. And to watch that happen kind of in real time, but also, recognize the like decades and decades of, historical amazing books for kids that have been made. I think kids are always drawn to a really excellent reading experience. And their tastes will vary from reader to reader. I always said that it was okay if like they didn't like something I was reading to them, or started a book and wanted to return it before their next library class because they weren't enjoying it. That to me felt like a really important skill to develop as a reader. And so tastes are all over the place, which is good. And there's so many books that can, grab any number of kids' attention. And that might vary book to book, kid to kid, but I think everyone is looking to recognize themselves or a part of themselves, see an experience from a different perspective, and just take some time to be immersed in a world that's not their own, regardless of the topic or category of book or age range of the reader. I think as readers, both kids and adults, that's why we do it.
Yeah. We love asking authors, what kind of conversations do you think families can have while they're reading the author's book? What about you? What do you think families can talk about as they're reading Round and Round the Year We Go, other than what that guy at the parent-teachers meeting talked about?
Yeah. I think that families in particular, or classrooms that sort of function as families, there's a lot of shared experience there, and you're creating your own traditions and your own activities that you return to year after year. So I would love for families to talk about what makes their February so special. Maybe it's somebody's birthday, or I don't know, something really particular to how they experience things. One of the funny things about writing this book is that I primarily live in Las Vegas, and the book starts in January, and the text is talking about icy air and snowflakes varying and building snowmen. And that's certainly not my experience of January in the desert. So I think maybe that could be a fun point of conversation too. How different is the book's version of the seasons from where you live?
Yeah, that is a very cool thing, a conversation for families to have, especially because families are so spread out nowadays. When I was growing up, I couldn't do anything wrong in my neighborhood because like everybody was related to me and they had permission to whack me in the back of the head if I did something stupid. But now, our particular family, we have relatives in Florida, relatives in Puerto Rico, relatives throughout New England. And just kind of thinking about, wow, it's February and this is what we're experiencing. But what do you think Titi Ani down in Puerto Rico is experiencing? What do you think the weather's like there? Right.
For better or for worse, I sort of had to just pick a world for the characters in the story to live in. But, of course, that's going to be very different from place to place, which is why it was important for me to make sure that the book read as just a real exploration of time and doing things with your friends, so that it didn't feel too stuck in a world that is not everybody's.
Yeah. I'm wondering, for July, did you write about, the streets melting in Las Vegas in July and August.
Yeah, I could have written that for Vegas from like March to November. That would have been a pretty boring book.
I've only visited Vegas a couple of times. Once to study magic, and I had a wonderful time. And I didn't go near the Strip, so it was a completely different experience.
Yeah. I always tell people if you go for the Strip and all of that, you're going to have a great time. But if you're spending a significant amount of time there, there's so much beyond the hoopla. It's a beautiful city, so much nature and wonderful people, and it's a really pretty town.
Yeah, it really is. And I remember when I first landed and got to the hotel, my first words to the when I was checking in is, man, the desert gets really cold at night. I didn't expect it.
It really does. It really does.
Tell me about you're the author and illustrator of Round and Round the Year We Go. What do you have a particular style that we can find throughout your work, or do you try to work different styles in different books?
Yeah, that's a really excellent question, because I think that's something I'm still thinking about from day to day and week to week. This is the third book that I have been both the author and illustrator of. However, it's the first book that has children in it, and I was really intimidated by designing characters and having them look similar from spread to spread. My earlier books that I illustrated are called Circle Under Berry, and some of these are snails, and they're more concept books about spatial relationships and sorting and classification. And so I was using a lot of very simple shapes or animals built from very simple shapes. So to jump into the world of more narrative illustration was a challenge for me and kind of intimidating. And my editor said to me, Carter, kids' heads are just circles. So start there. You know what you're doing. And it was a nice reminder for me to not be so afraid of the page. I think so often I work in cut paper primarily, and there's something really playful about that by nature. If I'm cutting out a shape or a pair of pants or, mouse ears, I can move it around on my paper before I commit to gluing it in place. So it feels like I'm almost building something rather than drawing a line and committing to that. I'm sure, painters and people who draw with pencil would say that, it's not that dramatic, but to me, it feels very permanent once I make a mark. But there's just something playful about just moving things around till it looks good, then you glue it down. And I think that's how kids work. So it kept me very connected to, just the way kids make art, which is nice. Most of my books prior to, my most recent 3, I was only the author for, and I've been an artist for a long part of my life, but I was, it took me a while to think about what my art voice was, and to make that jump, but I'm glad that I did.
Yeah. That cut paper technique. I think that would be so much fun. After reading Round and Round the Year We Go, for a family to sit down and go, hey, let's make our own cut paper, illustrations and,
right.
And do that manipulation of, okay, we'll put her over here first. And
it's just very accessible. I don't use fancy materials. I use the glue sticks that, go on purple and dry clear, Elmer's glue sticks. And, everyone has scraps of paper laying around. So there's nothing real fancy about the process itself, which I really like.
The only time I received any recognition, and it's not that I looked for a lot. I don't consider myself a visual artist at all, but I actually won an art prize in elementary school in 8th grade. Me and my friend, the challenge was to take wood scraps and create something. And we thought what we were doing was a little bit naughty, the kind of art that we created, but the teachers loved it and they gave us first place.
I love that so much. I took a sculpture class in college and it was, plaster, and we had the option to pour it into a real contained form, like a sphere or a cube, or a plastic bag. And I chose a plastic bag. So I started with this lump of like a lumpy plaster, and I had carved something into it. I have no idea what it was, but it broke right before we were to go around the room and give each other feedback. And so I sort of just propped it up with, I don't even know what the tool was called. It looked like a big spatula, like scraper thing. And I just kind of propped up my sculpture so that the classmates and my teacher could look at it. And, my teacher was just fascinated and went on and on about how I had incorporated the tool into the art itself and what a interesting statement that was. And I was like, oh, no. It just broke and I was trying to fix it. And, it's sort of a funny story, but it makes me realize that, art does not have to be, something that's worth hanging in a museum. First of all, who decides that? It can just be, experimental and sort of fun, and maybe something you don't get right on the first try, but, has a lot of, meaning to somebody who sees it, even if it's not what you intended. So I try to keep that in mind. That story helps.
Yeah. You mentioned the word sphere and you're a Las Vegas resident, and they have that incredible sphere theater venue. I don't know what experience.
Yeah.
I've seen a little bit of footage from it, and to me, it just seems overwhelming. I don't know if I can handle it. Have you visited that, and have you thought about the kind of, what, you're creating art with very simple, primitive, almost primitive kind of instruments and tools.
Right.
Do you ever start thinking, wow, well, what if I had a chance to come in and do something with all that technology?
Right. Oh, that's interesting. I've not been to the Sphere. I've seen it from the road and from airplanes. Like you can really see it when you're taking off on an airplane. You said, I lost it. I lost my train of thought. You said, tell me what you said.
I was wondering, have you ever, thought about creating with all that different technology?
Oh, right. Thank you. Yeah. So technology is actually interesting. I worked for a long time in motion graphics and visual effects, which is very much using technology to create artwork. Often it was for brand commercials, or I worked in video games for a while, title sequences. So yeah, I actually think I found my way to cut paper and picture book illustration because of working in visual effects and motion graphics.
Wow. So you kind of went backwards.
I did. So, and to that point, one of my very first teachers of motion graphics, he said, the most important thing for you to understand is what is it for and where is it going? And his point was the tech specifics of, am I designing for like a television screen, or, speaking of a sphere, like I remember having a job interview for a job I wish I had gotten, but I didn't. It was for doing motion graphics at the Staples Center, which I think has a different name now. But a lot of the wraparound scoreboards are like very long, skinny rectangles. So the design choices you make based on the size that you're creating for would also change. And that, what is it for and where is it going has also helped me with books. Thinking about what can a book hold? What can a book do that something on a screen can't? Or, where is it going? Who is going to read this? What types of color choices am I going to make? Because I think the age of my reader is very young. Yeah, it's a lot of thinking. I like how you said reverse engineering, sort of like going backwards to, the end goal and how to get yourself there.
Yeah. Well, it makes perfect sense that we should keep our audience in mind and who is going to be experiencing it on the end. I certainly know that I just had a performance the other day for a big group of 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. And I very quickly said, oh, I have to be up here making all sorts of mistakes. The goal isn't to come up here and look cool. I got to look like a dope and entertain these kids for 40
Right. Right. That reminds me of one of my early days in the library. I had kind of a bouncy seat that I would sit in to read them stories. It was low to the ground. It was closer to their faces. And one day I just plopped down on the chair and just bounced right off of it, just totally tumbled off the side. And it was a class of first graders, I'm pretty sure. And they kind of looked at me with very big eyes, trying not to laugh, but you could tell that they really wanted to. Mm-hmm. And once I told them okay, I'm not hurt. Let's all laugh about it. It was just, they erupted in, hysterics. And I think giving them permission, obviously I'm not going to tell children to laugh at each other for no reason, but it was such a nice moment of oh, we're in it together. Everyone's okay. It was a good hook to whatever story followed.
Awesome. Hey, speaking of libraries, I always like to remind the audience of how important a school library, a public library is. So, as somebody who was in the trenches, can you just remind us how important it is for us to support our kids' school and public libraries?
Yeah, what a great question. There's really no place like a school library in a school. And then similarly, a public library in a community. It is designed to be for everybody who enters. And I can guarantee you that the librarians are doing a lot of work studying their community, studying their school, figuring out how to develop a collection that's going to best support both the curriculum that's necessary and just the varied interests of their readers. They are advocating for the people that walk into the library. So for it to be a place that is for everybody, there's not too many places like that, I think. Schools in particular, kids are constantly facing projects that they get graded on, or the necessity of growth in a curricular fashion. And the library is a little bit free from that. It was kind of a hard conversation I would have with teachers often, or more administration than teachers. It's okay if a first grader wants to check out a book that they of course aren't quite prepared for to read. They just want to hold it close to them because maybe their older brother checks out that series and the physical thing, is meaningful. It's okay if a fourth grader wants to check out, a pigeon book that they read when they were in kindergarten because there's comfort and familiarity in something that they enjoyed and loved. And, for it to be a place that was free from, rules in the same way that a lot of classrooms have to be, for good reason, obviously, but, I think, they're a place for people, and that's what's essential.
Yeah. I've said here on the podcast many times, I think, I wouldn't have gotten through middle school if I didn't have my school library to go to.
I love that.
After, at some point, my teachers or maybe all the team got together and said, what can we do to keep this kid? And it was the deal was do your work, be quiet, do your work. And when you finish, you can go down to the library. And that was where I created, we were making podcasts back in the 60s by recording conversations onto cassette tapes. And I know a lot of people out there are like, of course there's school libraries. Every school has a library, but unfortunately every school doesn't have a library.
Right.
So
right.
We need to support them. Hey, Carter, where can we go to find out more about Round and Round the Year We Go and find out more about you?
Sure. Round and Round the Year We Go is published by Holiday House and Neil Porter Books. So you could go there. Also, my website is carterhiggins.com, and there is information on my whole collection of books and a bit of behind the scenes on this one in particular. So that's probably the best spot, carterhiggins.com. Links to my email newsletter and my social channels, and I'm always there.
Awesome. We've had a great time speaking to the author and illustrator of Round and Round the Year We Go. Our guest has been Carter Higgins. Carter, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, Jed. Hope you read a good book today.
Hey there, families! Are you looking for an exciting way to bond and learn together? Look no further than our STEM is Family Fun video series. Join us as we explore the fascinating world of STEM through hands-on activities right in your own home. Our series features lessons from experts at renowned institutions like the San Diego Children's Discovery Museum, the National Children's Museum in Washington, D.C., and Children's Museum Houston. From making homemade rainbow bridges to creating an oboe out of a straw, there's something for everyone in the family to enjoy. So grab your lab coats and get ready for an adventure. Go to readingwithyourkids.com and click on the STEM is Family Fun link at the top of the page and let the learning and laughter begin. STEM is Family Fun, where learning and bonding go hand in hand. Join us from beautiful Queensland in Australia. Our guest is here today to celebrate her Australian Animals Children book series. Please welcome to the show, Ryleigh A Starr. Hey, Ryleigh, how are you?
Hi, Jed. Thank you so much. It's so fantastic to be here.
I'm really excited to have you on. Australia, I was sharing with Ryleigh that one of my international daughters is now living in Australia, and I love her. I love learning about the country through her eyes, and I have other friends from Australia. It just seems like you have a lot in common with the States, but it's also a very different place to live.
Yeah, absolutely. We are inundated with everything from the States, our TV shows and what have you, but we have our unique little quirks, definitely.
Yeah, well, I apologize for the TV shows. I don't have any control over that.
Oh, no, we love them. We love them.
So I'm guessing that the Australian Animals Children's Book Series is going to introduce us to some of the really strange and interesting animals that we can find in Australia.
Absolutely. Look, we have characters of all the ones you will have heard of: koalas, kangaroos, emus, echidnas, platypus. But we also have curlews, numbats, black cockatoos, the most amazing animal creatures, and we've woven them into the stories. But also, and you'll love this, Jed, because I travel so much through Australia, we actually have the real, true Australian environments, the rainforests, the outback. So when I've travelled, I've actually recorded all of those. And no, we don't call them billabongs, so lagoons and lakes and creeks, everything, beaches, the Gold Coast, it all features all around Australia.
It's really fascinating. Australia is, I absolutely need to get on an airplane and spend 24 hours in the sky and to get to Australia because it's just, you have, it's a country, it's a continent, and it seems to have everything, as you said, rainforests, the outback, deserts, the coastlines. You can, drive around, and it's kind of like going around the world.
It is. It's quite vast. It's not uncommon to have one area of Australia in flood and the other one with horrendous bushfires, and another area, the snow is there on the top of the mountains. It's all in one day, all at the same time. It's quite incredible.
You know, you mentioned some of the animals that we're going to meet, and one of them you mentioned was a platypus. I just heard a comedian the other day saying God must have been on some kind of substance when he created the platypus. He's like, let's take a beaver and put a duck bill on it. You know,
They are just the most incredible little creatures. I'm currently in Mackay, and just west of here, about an hour and a half's drive, is a little place called Youngala. You go up the range, and there's Broken River there, and there's actually platypus viewing platforms, and you actually stand, and dawn and dusk is when they're out. In the cooler months, they'll be out longer because they don't like the hot sun, but you actually see them play, and you can see the bubbles under the water, and then next minute up they pop. They're quite incredible little creatures.
wow.
Quite dangerous. A lot of people don't know, the male platypus, actually has a poisonous spur. So they're actually quite dangerous.
Why? And where is this spur located?
On his back foot, on their back feet, webbed feet.
Wow. Wow.
Yep.
Well, that's the other thing about Australia is that we have a fair amount of animals that can eat you, but you have some sneakier and more deadly animals and insects and snakes and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Where I live, there's quite a lot of bushland, and we have an outlook over the ocean, so a lot of visitors to the area come up and visit, and they'll look at me and go, because we're beside a creek and overlooking the ocean and all the bushland in between. They go, are there any snakes? And I go, well, yeah, under those bushes, but I don't go walking through there. Are there any crocodiles? Yes, see that creek? That's where they live, in the mangroves on the creek. I said, I've never seen one. I've lived there 9 years, never seen one. I've seen evidence of them. I know people who've seen them, but I don't go digging around at dusk and dawn to sort of introduce myself.
You know, my beautiful wife and I and my daughter and her fiance took a trip to Costa Rica a few years back, and we're on this little canoe thing, and a guide was taking us through a river through a sloth sanctuary. And, yeah, it was wonderful. And
Incredible.
yeah, my beautiful wife asked our guide if there was any danger of crocodiles or alligators or whatever. And he said, oh yeah, well, there's a caiman right there. And, my wife said, where? And the, guide took his little stick and, gave it a little tap, and it snapped. And my wife was very upset and said, don't do that again.
Yeah, and don't dangle your hands over the edge.
Absolutely. Hey, any idea how these really interesting and unique animals ended up all in one place?
They figured out where the best place in the world was, and they all decided to stay.
Okay, that's and then they kicked all the boring animals out too, right?
A little biased. No, we've got all the boring ones as well. They just don't make all the headlines.
Now, how is the series structured? Is this a series of stories featuring these animals, or is it more like a nonfiction book where like here's a section about the koala?
Yeah, no, I'm definitely not a zoologist, so I don't have any authority to write non-fiction books. So, but I've grown up around these animals, and I developed a love of them from non-fiction books when I was growing up. So I'm a teacher by profession many years ago. I'm also a mum. I have a natural love for literacy and reading. When I was in the classroom, my students, no matter how strong their ability in reading, even the poorer readers loved reading, because I developed that passion in them that it doesn't matter what level, just escape, just enjoy. So we're in a really exciting time, and I closed my business a couple of years ago, had some family stuff happen, was ready to get back into it, and went, you know what, I've always wanted to write about write a children's book series. But right now we've got all of the digital tech stuff that can enable that so quickly and so seamlessly. So I sat down and thought, well, what is it that I want? What do I love about how I learned to read? So I had a couple of things. One was sitting on my dad's lap and reading a book with him, reading every day. When I went to bed each night, you know, the familiar cry was just one more chapter. And, of course, 5 chapters on, I was still reading. Put that book down now, go to sleep. Came quite familiar. So I knew that I just developed that love because I was immersed in all of the books. But also I had some lovely non-fiction books about Australian animals, and that's where I learned about the less common ones. The black swan is native to Australia. The numbat is a crazy little creature. I've only ever seen one in my life in a zoo. The quokka down off South Australia are just incredible little creatures. And I learned them just from the books I was reading. I'd never seen them until I started travelling as an adult. So what I wanted to do is develop a book series that was very Australian, because also any of the narrated videos or books or anything that we see, and I have nothing against America. Some of my best friends are definitely from the US, but we get a lot of American accents, and it's very challenging to find Australian audio, and if you do, it often sounds British. So I've actually cloned my voice, so it's a true Australian accent. So what I did was I came up with the storylines. Then I tapped into the fabulous AI resources that we have to create these storylines with true Australian video behind them of the video animals. And look, if you try and do it, there are some challenges because AI does not know Australia at all. So I'm fortunate enough that I have lots of photos and videos from my travels that I can plug into. So it's quite unique that you will not find anywhere else. So I collated all of that. I allowed it to write the story to my specifications. But as you know, sometimes British English or Australian English, the spelling is a little bit different. For example, colour in America is C-O-L-O-R, but in Australia it's C-O-L-O-U-R. And I remember back to my students, we were reading a book, and I remember one of the, not the stronger readers, coming to me and going, oh, I found a spelling mistake. They spelt mum, M-O-M. Now, the very fact that they were clued in enough to reading to even pick that up was amazing. But then we could have a discussion about the difference between Australian spelling and US spelling. So I wanted something that reflected the Australian spelling, the Australian way of life, the Australian environment. They all have a little life lesson, often, you know, about loneliness or making friends, things that students really encounter in the classroom. Mm-hmm. It looks, and I'm drawing on my experience as a teacher for those, because it might be someone who's lonely and doesn't make friends, but we also look at what's in those personality traits that could be contributing to that. So while it doesn't say, and the lesson is, it's not an Aesop's fable, and the moral of the story is, right. It does have that lesson so that it can, all of the stories can just be enjoyed mm-hmm. as a story, or they can be developed as a discussion in the classroom or with parents. So they can all have multiple levels. What I'm not doing, one of the things I hated growing up was every time I read something, I then had to do a comprehension sheet on it. And I'm just like, can I just read? Can I just read? Or I had to do a book report, or I had to do, well, can I just read? I can tell you all about it. I've escaped into these wonderful new worlds. I went and, solved all the mysteries with Trixie Belden, and I went exploring through the forest with Enid Blyton's Famous Five. I've been there, but did I want to write a book report about it? No. Mm-hmm. So I've deliberately not created teacher resources for them. Mm-hmm. But they can certainly develop discussion points.
Wow. Well, I can imagine that families could have such a fun time reading the books, learning about the animals, maybe going to an atlas if people actually have those anymore, or get on the Google machine to see where the animals are coming from, to see the Australia and the geography of the country. I'm curious. You said early on that the kids in your classroom enjoyed reading no matter what level they were reading at. We've heard here that, kids get to third, fourth grade here in the States. You learn to read until second grade, and then once you're in third grade, you read to learn, and that's where a lot of kids lose their love of reading because they're falling behind. How did you manage to help your kids maintain that love of reading, even if they were struggling, even if they were a level or two behind where their peers were?
There was no judgment. We had free reading time. They didn't have to do a book report. They didn't have to write an essay on it. They didn't have to do a test on it. It was literally free reading for the enjoyment of free reading. So I actually brought my books from home. And I remember I had it was called Corky, C-O-R-K-Y, Corky series. And they were little hardcover. They were only about 10 or 12 pages long. And there was only one sentence per page. Like, they were really, really basic readers. And I probably read them. I was a very good reader. But I probably read them at age 4 to 5. Independently. So they were a low level. And I'm talking, these kids are probably 9, 10 years old. And reading to learn stage. The weaker readers grasped those books. And there was, 5 or 6 in the series. They read them and they read them again. Now, initially they read them so that I would chastise them and say, go and pick something harder. But I didn't. And they read them again. I went, great. And they read them again. Fantastic. And then they went, maybe we'll try something. So of their own accord, they went up and found something a little harder and a little more challenging. They weren't reading what the kids who are absolutely immersed in novels, they weren't ready for that. But during that time, they progressed from these, they got success with reading. They could read a whole book, and they developed their own appreciation for reading, and they started, little short books that would just say a paragraph to a page. And those same readers from the beginning to the end of the school year had progressed from Corky, and they were all able to read more than Corky, but they got that self-satisfaction, that self-praise and that confidence, and they progressed themselves up into short, children's novels that were maybe aimed around that sort of 8-year-old level, and loved them. And they went, oh, wow, we've got whole stories, and it doesn't matter if we don't know every single word. We don't have to read them out loud. We don't have to do a report, but we get the gist of understanding through. So, and we had all of the read-alongs. So I remember growing up too, we used to have the little 45 RPM vinyls, and we had the book to go along with them. And the first thing it said was, it's time to turn the page when Tinkerbell rings her little bell. And I read along with them. So I had all of those resources. So we used those in the classroom as well, so that if there were words that they were struggling with, they didn't have to. They could incorporate that by listening. So that you'll find through the whole series is why they're done as a video, they're a digital online series, but they all have the proper like captions like karaoke read along for exactly that word. I don't dumb the language down.
Right.
If there's a word that needs to be there, that's what's there.
Great.
But the read along helps them understand, and they understand the language in context rather than, have to learn a spelling list.
Right. Well, it makes so much sense, but unfortunately, I don't know if this is the situation in Australia, but I know a lot of teachers, especially public school teachers here in the States, are telling me that their hands are tied. I've told the story before. My beautiful wife, who taught for 34 years, she would get a lot of kids from the Caribbean and South America who would come to her classroom. They were chronologically in the 4th or 5th grade, year 4 or 5, but they had never been to school a day in their life. And here they were, 10, 11, 12 years old. And because they were that age, my wife is expected to teach them division. And these kids couldn't count. And, so she would go back and she had to sneak to teach the kids to count, because if she was caught by her principal, she would get reprimanded for not doing the long division. And it just didn't make any sense to me at all.
Yeah, well, I've been out of the classroom for a long time. I'm sure there are certainly situations like that happen in Australia. We have a huge immigration into the country every year, and we also, of course, have the refugees who come in, and they don't have that same background. Certainly, when I was teaching, I looked at every student as an individual and took them from where they were. If that meant I had to do 30 lesson plans, I did 30 lesson plans.
Good for
because not every student could learn. I was very fortunate in my teacher training to go to a one-teacher school, and so you had, 30 kids, and they were across 7 grades at that stage. And in each of those grades, there might be 3 or 4 children in one grade level. There were 3 differing abilities. So I really learned, that was an eye-opener for me. So I really learned that, and a principal early on said, well, take that and apply that to your classroom. You've got 30 different levels. So I guess when I was teaching all subjects, I tried to cater as much as possible for every ability level. It's very, very challenging though, and I imagine in the States it's similar. Teachers have to often supply a lot of their own resources, even in the public school system here where everything is supplied. Teachers have always got their hands in their pockets. So I had a lot of resources over the years that, were there that I could draw on.
Yeah. Ryleigh, where can we go to find out more about Australian Animals Children's Book Series and find out more about what makes you a star?
So my website, freshly launched, RyleighAStarr.com.au. It is an Australian website. So Ryleigh is RYLEIGH, A, and then Star with 2 R's, of course, .com.au. And so it's a subscription service. I've got a lot of free resources so people can just access the free stories on there. I've also got some paid ones if they want to access them. But also we've got the Australian Animals series is specifically a subscription monthly model. Very affordable. It's $9.90 Australian, which is about $7 a month US. And there's 30 new stories every month.
Wow, what a great resource, and very reasonably priced. We've had a great time speaking to the author and driving force behind Australian Animals Children Book Series. Our guest has been Ryleigh A. Starr. Ryleigh, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for your time. This has been an absolute blast. Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. We'd love for you to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram, and at JedleyMagic on X. We'd also love it if you could check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids, where you can find all of our STEM is Family Fun and Drawing with Your Kids videos. If you'd like to send us a message, you can do that really easily by going to readingwithyourkids.com and using the contact button up at the top of the page. You can also find out if you are an author. You can find out how you can be a guest here in the show and tell thousands of people all over the world about your fantastic children's book. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to start by thanking our guest, Carter Higgins. Please be sure to check out Round and Round the Year We Go. And Ryleigh A Starr. Be sure to check out her wonderful series celebrating Australian animals. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Chris Doherty, Rory Grady, Judy Hu, Stella Sheree, Hannibal Sanj, Alyssa Montiero, Julia Lipman, Devin Hill, Riley Oluwu. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place, and you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.